Hey everybody, back with another Polars tutorial. Hope you're all doing real well. Today we're going to be talking about filling in missing data using Polars and Python. Now in your data, oftentimes it's not all going to be filled in. There are going to be missing values. And in the course of your project, before you proceed with any kind of meaningful analysis where you summarize the results, you need to decide what you want to do with this missing data. And what you do with the missing data is going to determine on the requirements of your project and just what makes the most sense for you, your stakeholders, or your customers. Sometimes in a project, you might want to drop that data altogether and just get rid of those records. Sometimes you might want to fill it in or impute it. And so that's what I'll be talking about today, just filling in the missing data. And I'll just be showing some of the high-level tools that Polars offers you. There's a whole branch of statistics out there about the best ways to fill in missing data, and there's all these complicated algorithms. I definitely won't be going over some of those. I'll just show you some of the baseline tools Polars has to give you. So namely in this video, I'll be talking about how to fill in missing data with the fill null method. And the fill null method can be used in a variety of ways. It allows us to fill in missing data with literal values, so we can pass in just a literal value of, say, like 6 or 7 or 7.5 or just anything we want, and that value will be passed in and will be used to fill in all these missing values. And I'll also show you how to fill in missing values with the mean or the median if we wanted to use some kind of summary statistic to fill in these missing data. And finally, I'll show you how to fill in missing data using forward and backfilling. So in other words, if we were to assume that a record near these missing values are probably very similar to one another, it might make sense to take this 8 right here, for example, and use that 8 to fill in these missing values. Or maybe perhaps we want to backfill and use this 7.5 in here and backfill these null values. So we'll go over that as well. So first thing we'll talk about is filling in a missing values with just a literal value. So this is probably the easiest of them all. And so the way we would do this is I'm going to create a new variable here. I'm just going to call it literal mag. And I forgot to mention the data we're using here is some historical earthquake data for the United States. These are just the first 20 or 30 records. And the column we're going to be filling in the nulls for is this magnitude column right here. So the magnitude of the earthquake. Some years we have it, some years we don't. The years we don't have it, it's null. So if we wanted to fill in these missing magnitude values with a literal value, we would point to the column. So we'd do pl call magnitude, and then we'd do dot fill null, and then we just pass in the value that we want to fill it with. So here we're filling it with the value of 6.0. So we'll just run that and take a look and see how the results look. Okay, so here's our new column with all the values filled in, and we see that all these null values, when they were once null, now in this new column that we created, they all have a value of 6.0. Now you can maybe see the problem with this here. If you have a lot of missing data, like a lot of missing data, if you just fill it in with one singular value like this, and this is the same for the summary statistics that we're going to fill it in with, what you do end up doing is you end up getting rid of a lot of the variation in the data. And you do get a lot of repetitive values. And so the next thing we'll talk about is we'll fill in a missing value with the mean and the median. And so this is going to be very similar to what we saw before. We're just going to fill it in instead of with a literal value, 6.0, we're going to fill it in with a summary statistic. So how do we do that? So the first thing we do is we point to the column, and so I'm creating two new columns here. One column to represent imputation with the median, I'm calling that mean mag, and another one to represent imputation, with the mean, and then another one to represent imputation with the median. And so in both of these instances, we point to a column, so pl call magnitude. Then we do dot fill null as we did before, and instead of passing in a literal value between the parentheses for this fill null method, what we're going to do is we're going to point to the column again and just do a summary statistic. So pl call magnitude dot mean. or PL call magnitude dot median. And this data set I fashioned here only has one country in it, so we don't have to worry about grouping this operation by anything. If there were multiple countries in here, we certainly would, but that wouldn't be too big of an issue either. That's very easy to implement. So we'll go ahead and run that too, and check the results. Okay, so here's the two new columns we created, mean mag and median mag. And we can see for this mean mag column, there were once null instances. Now there's this 6.547 column, and in median, there's a 6.7 in each of these rows where there were once missing data. And these values, of course, correspond to the mean of the non-missing values as well as the median of the non-missing values. Okay, so that's basically all there is to fill null. There's not a whole lot to it. It's very easy to use. And so the next thing I'll talk about is forward filling and backfilling. And so again, let's say instead of using a statistic to fill in a value for these columns, we wanted to use a neighboring row to fill in this column. So let's say we wanted to use this 8.0 right here to fill in these two missing values right here. And likewise, we wanted to use this 7.5 to fill in these missing values down here. So to do that, we would do something called forward filling. And the way to do that is actually very simple in Polars. We don't have to specify fill null. So I'm calling this a new column I'm creating called fill mag. And this is where we're going to impute the missing data by forward filling and or backfilling. So to do that, we would do pl.call and then point to the column again, and then we would just do forward fill, and that is going to forward fill the values. So let's take a quick look at that. See how it looks. Okay, so now we see in these null values right here, where they were once null, now they're 8. These null values are now 7.5, which corresponds to this record right here. This record is now 7.0, which corresponds to this guy. And all these values right here, when they were null, they're now 5.2, because again, these are all being forward filled. Now you'll notice right here we have some residual missing values, and that's because we were only forward filling. Ideally, what we would want to do if we were using a filling method to fill these in is we would use this 9.0 to backfill that way. And it's very easy to do that in Polars. There's a corresponding method for forward fill called dot backward fill. So we can easily method chain that on and take care of those residual missing values. And there we go. So one consideration we might have here is that if we forward fill too much on a variable, we're going to have a lot of repeated values, like a lot. So ideally, sometimes what you might want to do is limit the amount of filling that's done. And so one thing we might want to do is set a limit, like only forward fill 5 spaces, and then for the rest of them, just backward fill. And so there's a very useful tool in Polars you can use called limit. And what limit is going to do is it's going to limit the amount of times a case can be used to forward fill. So here, we're going to impute a maximum of 10 values, and we're going to do that by forward filling 5 spaces and backward filling 5 spaces. Okay, so now we see our results are a little bit different. So for these first 5 records here, we see that these have a value of 5.2, and that's because they were forward filled 5 spaces from this record up here. And after we did 5 imputations with that, we go down to this 6.0 right here, and that was backfilled 3 records. So these 8 cases were forward filled with 5 records from this record right here, and backfilled 3 records from this record right here. So one consideration you might be thinking is, well, like, how do we know all the data was forward and backfilled? How do we know there's no more missing data? What I usually do, just to be absolutely sure, is I just kind of add a whole bunch of these on. There's nothing wrong with doing that. And just I check afterwards if all our data is filled in by just doing print pl.call magnitude that is null dot sum. And this is just a good quick check to make sure that all of our missing data has been filled in and there's not any left. Whoops. Okay, I was pointing to the wrong column. Sorry about that. There we go. Okay, guys, that's all there is to filling in missing data in Polars. As you can see, there's some very useful tools to use. This is just kind of the start of the science of filling in missing data. There's a lot more to it, and the way you do it is going to be determined by your methodological needs and just the requirements of your project. But thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a good rest of your day.